Hey everybody, today we're going to get back to basics and take a look at some of the CSS editing features inside of Pinegrow. This is one of those things where once you get it, it's incredibly helpful, but until then it can be very confusing and very intimidating. So I'm not going to talk anymore, let's just dive right into the sample project and take a look at it. Let's start off by taking a look at this project in Visual Studio Code. Here we have a very rudimentary layout, and you can see that we've got a section wrapper that's giving us a little bit of padding. Then inside of that we have a div, and that's going to hold our 2-column layout. Then we've got a column for our image, and then another column for some text. It's very, very simple. And if we take a look at the CSS is also very simple. One of the things to notice here is that we do have a media query. So underneath 761 pixels, we are stacked. Larger than 761 pixels, we go side by side. You'll notice some of this CSS is pretty ugly. It's not really meant to be a tutorial on how to write CSS as much as it is a tutorial on how to implement CSS inside of Pinegrow. Now over here in Pinegrow, we have a project loaded up that's very similar to the one that we just looked at in Visual Studio Code. We've got an outer section that's going to have our padding. Then we've got our div, and that's going to have the layout. Our inner column is going to have the image, and then the second inner column is going to have the text. If we switch over to the project panel, you can see that our index.html file is about as generic as it comes and very similar to the one that we looked at in Visual Studio Code. And our style.css file is completely blank. Let's close these up and we'll take a look. We're going to switch back to the tree view. And now we want to take a look at the style panel. This is where we're going to be spending most of our time today. And this is what controls the CSS inside of Pinegrow. So the first thing that I want to do is add that padding around our section. I'll come over and I'll select our section element. And now on the style panel, I want to add a class and some padding. So to do that, I just click right in here and I'm going to call this wrapper. So I say .wrapper. And you can see it's already done a few things. It says that the rule is going to be created in style.css, and it's saying that we're going to add that class wrapper to the selected element, which is our section. So I'll hit create. And now you can see that it's changed to say section.wrapper. Below that, we now see what's happening inside of the CSS. We can see here's our style.css file, and we have our rule that says .wrapper, and we can add things to it. So I'm just going to come on down here, and we're going to say margin, padding, and sizing, and I'm going to give this 2 rems all the way around of padding. And before we go any farther, I want to open up this CSS file so that you can see what's happening in the CSS as we're using Pinegrow. Because Pinegrow does not store all this information in a separate database, it actually writes it straight to the HTML and CSS files. So we can go ahead and just click on this little code icon that opens up our style.css, and we can see in real time what it's writing for us. We can also go ahead and make any changes directly to the code that we want. So now that we have this wrapper on there, the next thing that I want to do is I actually want to create a second CSS file. And the reason I want to do that is because a lot of times I find myself creating WordPress blocks with Pinegrow. And one of the good practices there is to have a separate CSS file for each block. That makes the block more portable. It can go from site to site. And it can also make it so that the CSS for that particular block is only loaded in those places where the block is used. It also makes for a great demo here to show you what it's like to add new CSS files inside of Pinegrow. So let's go ahead and do that really quickly. We're going to use our style.css to hold things that are more general. And then we're going to create another one called layout.css that holds just this layout stuff. So to do that, I come up here to style sheets and I'm going to say add and manage. And here I want to create a new style sheet. So we'll just click on this little guy here. And inside the CSS folder, I'm going to call this layout.css. We're going to add it. And now that it's been added, I need to attach it to the page. Okay, so you can see that we have our style.css that's been added and attached. Now we have our layout.css that's been added but not attached yet. So here I'm going to just click the attach to index.html button, and we can close that. Now you can see that we have 2 different CSS files inside of our style sheet window. And if we click on the little drop-down arrow, you can see we have some more options here. So we can lock a CSS file so that we're not able to write to it at all. This is handy if you have something like a reset or something else that you don't want to mess with. And also if you're using SCSS or less, you can use that here as well, but we're not going to mess with that in today's tutorial. So for now, I'm just going to close this up. I just wanted to show you what this looks like so that you know that it's a thing that's available. This icon here will edit the style sheet code, and that will bring it up down here. Matter of fact, let's just click that button and open up our layout.css so that we can see it. And now we'll close the window. Now the next thing that I want to do is to add some CSS to this outer class. Now the thing you'll notice is that we have this outer element that's attached to the div, but we don't have anything for it here in the style panel. And that's because even though it's attached to the div, we don't have anything in our CSS that's using it. So we don't actually have any rules created for it. So we're not going to see anything in the style panel until we've actually created the rule. So let's do that right now. I'm going to come over and click these three dots, and this opens up a dialog that lets us create a new CSS rule with the selected builder. Inside of here, you can see that we have some selectors to choose from, and this lets us visually build out our rules. So since I want to work with this outer class, I just click on outer. And then if I want to put a media query in, I can do that here, or I can choose the style sheet. And since we want to put this in the layout.css style sheet, I'm just going to select that down here to layout.css and say create. And you can see that it's created the rule for us, .outer, inside of layout.css. Now, all we have to do is come over and add our rules. So I want to start off by saying display grid. I want to use a gap of 1 rem. And then I want to create a border. So I'm going to create a 1 pixel border. And for color, I want to do, here we go. Something right there should be fine. And I want to make this solid. And then we're going to do that all the way around. And now you can see it building out the CSS for us as I add those properties. Now here we can already see a few problems. One of them is that our image is overflowing, and that's because we don't have any sort of max width set on this. And then the other thing is we haven't done anything to add definitions for our box sizing. So let's go ahead and tackle that real quick. I'm going to come over to our image. We'll just select that. And here we're going to create another rule. And we're going to say our image element. And this time I want to put it in the style sheet because this is going to be sort of a little bit of a reset. So we're going to create this in their style sheet, just a rule for image. And here I want to give this a max width of 100% and a height of 100%. And now you can see that it's staying inside of that div, so that's good. And the other thing that I want to do is to add a pretty generic box sizing border box. So here I'm going to switch over to our style.css because this is one of those places where there isn't a great way to do it inside the builder. So we're just going to come right in here to the code and add a universal selector and say box sizing border box. This is going to help us out later on. Now with that done, we're going to save that file and switch back to layout.css since this is where we'll be working and we want to see what's happening. So the next thing that I want to do is to create a media query so that when we are in a mobile breakpoint, we see this stacked, and when we're in a desktop breakpoint, we see it horizontally. And we can handle breakpoints a few different ways inside of Pinegrow. One is to just write it manually here inside the code editor, and that's probably the least efficient way to do it. Another way is to use this media query builder, and that's sort of the way that Pinegrow has done it for a very long time. But then relatively recently, they added these shortcuts up here to make media queries much simpler. Now, if we hover over these, we can see what it's doing. I can say extra small, and this is going to apply to anything that's 0 pixels and up. Our small applies to anything 481 pixels and up. Medium is 769 and up. Large is 1025 and up. Extra large is 1281 and up. Now you'll notice that these are written to be mobile first. So if you're already in the mindset of working mobile first, it's not a big deal. If you're not, and you would prefer to do things desktop first, then you probably want to go back and use the traditional media query dialog. So I'm going to show you how to do it with the shortcuts first, and then we'll delete that and we'll go back and we'll do it the other way. So I'm going to start by just selecting our outer div again, and I make sure that we have the correct rule selected. And then I just come on down here to the shortcut and I say, I want anything with the 769 and up breakpoint, create a media query for that. So I come right in here and I say, create the rule, and you'll see that it's written our media query for us. And here I'm just going to come on in. And I'm going to say template columns, fit content, 40% for the image, and then 1 full row for the text. So now we can see that on desktop size breakpoints, we've got them side by side. On smaller breakpoints, they're stacked. Let's go ahead and do something else here. If I click on this little icon, I can say add new page view. This is really handy because I can see what it's going to look like in mobile, as well as a desktop breakpoint side by side. Now you might notice here in the style panel, I don't see my media query rules. I'm only seeing what's applied to the mobile breakpoint. And that's because I've got this little icon selected up here that says set active view for CSS editing. When this is selected, I'm seeing the rules that apply to this view. If I click over to here, you can see the rules that are being applied to this preview window, and that shows our media query. Now, it is nice when we look in here, we can see what's applying to the media query on all style sheets. So we've got the things that are being applied from layout.css, as well as our universal box sizing from our style.css. And there's one other setting while I'm here that you probably want to take a look at. You might find it helpful. I usually don't. And that's if you click on this little settings and tools icon, you've got the sync with page view. And what that's going to do is it's going to make it so that whatever view you're on at the time, whatever you have selected, it's automatically going to synchronize and show what's being applied there. I prefer to keep this off so that I can have a little bit more control over what I'm seeing, and I can have the freedom to click wherever I want because I'm very click happy. I can have the freedom to click wherever I want and have it not messing up what I'm looking at here inside the style panel. All right, but like I said, we're going to remove this media query. So I'm going to come back over here to our layout.css and click on the delete button. And actually, while I'm here, let's take a look at some of these other icons. This eye icon will comment out the CSS. And then to unhide it, we just click on the eye icon again. And then for all of our rules, we can hover over and click on the code icon and edit the rule, just that one rule specifically. Or I can come over here to the CSS file and click on our code button, and that's what's going to open it up down here in the bigger code window. So we've got a lot of options on how we can see things, where we're going to edit them, all that good stuff. Now let's go ahead and we're just going to remove this entire media query. Boom, gone. Because this time I'm going to use the media query builder. So again, we need to come down here and have our rule selected, our outer rule selected. And I'm going to click on media query. And you can see that it says no breakpoints are defined. Use manage breakpoints to define them. So this is one of those places where you need to do a little bit of setup beforehand, and it's going to save you a lot of trouble in the long run. Now there's a few different places where we can go to manage our breakpoints. One is to just click this link right here and it opens up our manage breakpoints dialog. Or the way that I generally do it is I just click on the drop down over here and say manage breakpoints. Once that opens up, I can put the breakpoints in that I want to work with. And for our purposes, I'm going to just add a few breakpoints. I'm going to add one at 361 pixels. I'm going to add another one at 781 pixels. And then another one at 1201 pixels. Oops, 1201 pixels. And say close. And you can see what it's done. It's already mapped them to extra small, medium, and large. So it's tried its best to map them to something that's close here in the quick window. But now when we click on this media query button, we see that we can use these here in the middle to say anything that's going to be 361 pixels and up will apply there, 781 and up, 1201 and up. Or if we want to use desktop first CSS, we can do anything smaller than 361, smaller than 781, smaller than 1201. And then we can also do something in here that says, from 361 to 781 pixels or 781 to 1201. So we have a lot of different ways that we can create our media query. Now, if I click on 781 right now, it's actually going to take this rule that we set here to outer, and it's going to apply that to it. So let's click on that so you can see what happens. You can see that it's turned that into a media query, which is not what we want. So instead of modifying the existing rule, we want to come here and create a new rule. So here I'm going to select our outer again, and here we're going to do media query, 781 and up, and I want to put this in my layout.css, create, and you can see that it's already written it for us down there. We'll come back here to our template columns, pop in their fit content 40% 1FR, and boom, now we have it. Next up, I want to change the object fit and object position for our image. So I'm going to click on our image, and we'll do our rule builder again. And here I'm going to say anything with my image wrapper, image, create that rule in layout.css. And I want to use object fit, cover, object position, center. And then here for our text wrapper, we're going to select it. We're going to create a rule for it. And I want to add padding of 1 rem all the way around. And there we go. Next thing we're going to do is a little pseudo class. So for this, I want to use my image again, and I want to do a hover. So for that, I come in and I'm going to create another rule for image wrapper image. And this time I want to select the hover pseudo class. So I can just click the icon right next to any of these and create the pseudo class. And we're going to create that rule. And with that selected, we'll come over here and we'll add a transform. We're going to scale this 1.1, X and Y, and we'll do a transition. Property all, duration 0.2 seconds, ease in and out. And now you can see when we hover over it, we get a little bit of growing. Interesting that it's not showing my timing function. There we go, ease in, out, choose. All right, now it's written it. Okay. So I'm not sure why that wasn't rating it, probably because I hadn't clicked into another place yet, but it still works. You can see when we hover over it, it grows, and that works just fine. Now, if we click away from it and click back in, you'll notice that we don't have the hover anymore. And that's because by default, it's not going to show us our pseudo classes here inside the style panel. We actually need to select it up here to see what's going on. Now, if we click on the show element in hover state, we can see that it's hovering on the preview window, and we can also see the hover state for it inside of the style panel. So this is one of those places that's a little bit awkward, and sometimes it's kind of hard to find what you're looking for. But once you know that it's there, it's pretty simple. Now, we've talked about how to add classes to an element, how to create rules, and how to add properties to them, but we haven't talked about how to remove classes from an element. Now, to do that, we actually need to get away from our style panel and go over to the properties panel. And here you'll see all the classes that are applied to the selected element. And all we need to do, so for example, if we wanted to get rid of this wrapper element, is we just click on the little X button next to it, and it goes away. So the one thing that I haven't touched on yet is this tree panel. Now, this is a new way of working with CSS inside of Pinegrow, and it's still being refined a little bit, so I wouldn't be surprised if it changes over the coming months. But what this basically does is it shows us everything in a tree view so that you can see what's happening, almost like you look at the code. You're sort of seeing the same thing here, only you're seeing what's being inherited. And you're able to very quickly come in here and say, all right, for my image wrapper image, I'm going to add a new property. And if I wanted to do, let's see, object position, object fit, let's see, I just want to do max width. I want to change my max width here. So I can just start typing in max width and then select it. And you can see that it adds my property and I can just type in my value. So this is one of those places where I haven't played with it very much. I still prefer the old way of working. But this is a different way, and I can see how it would speed things up once you're used to it. I just haven't gotten there yet. Now, there's a similar thing that they've done for Tailwind that I do find incredibly handy. But they're kind of two different things. They just look very similar. So let's delete that last rule before I forget to delete it. So that's pretty much it. You can see that it's not very complicated to work with CSS. It's just a matter of learning your way around the interface and figuring out what things do. One of the hardest parts is going to be really just understanding what these different icons are, how things are grouped so that you can quickly find them. But just like any builder, once you've gone in and you've done a project or two, you start to realize what these icons do and how to find things. You can navigate through it very, very quickly and easily. But the thing that I really love is that if there's something that there's not a property for already, I can just come in and click on the code button, type in whatever I need, and I'm good to go. And then last thing I do is I will generally come in and reorder my CSS here inside the code window. And I can do that either inside of Pinegrow or I can bring it inside of Visual Studio Code and change the order of things just to clean it up or to add some section headers and make it a little bit more easy to navigate. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. All right, here we go. For real this time. Better there. Back. We're going to do it. Not going to fuck it up. I don't even know where I'm going with this anymore. You may or may not know about it. So close. So fucking close.